Hi YouTube, hi VC, it's Rob here with another video, and I'm just going to show some pickups that I've had over the last 3 months really. Picked a lot of stuff up, chose 13 records to show, so better get cracking. First record I want to show is a remix of an album that came out in 2010. So it's Wake Up the Nation by Paul Weller. There's Paul on the back. So there's 16 tracks on this album, and this is probably a lot of Paul Weller's recent albums I've not been a big fan of. His Fat Pot that came out this year will not be featuring in my best albums of this year. I think I rated it about 5.3, so certainly not one of my favourite albums of the year. This one is up and down, but it's got more ups and downs. Wake Up the Nation is a great track, sort of talking about how the world feels to a guy probably reaching 60, Facebook, etc. No Tears to Cry is a real sort of, it's got a real 60s vibe. The first track on side 2 is great as well, Aim High. Sort of quite experimental in places. An album that's, you know, if you can find it, it's certainly worth picking up. It did come with this booklet as well, with the lyrics. So the album was remixed last year. Can I tell the difference? Not really. Like I say, it's certainly my favourite Weller album from the last 10 years. So it's just standard black vinyl. But yeah, pretty pleased to have this in the collection. Wake Up the Nation by the one and only Paul Weller. So I've got a reissue here to show, which is an album that originally came out in 81, so it's 40 years old. And it's Juju. Hi, Suzy and the Banshees, a 4th album. Featuring, of course, John McGeoch on guitar. There he is. Just a fantastic guitar player, guitarist. Suzy there, Steve Severin and Budgie. And you also get the lyrics if you want to sing along. Very thick, I think it's 180. So there's the label. Just comes on black wax. So this album was produced by Nigel Gray, who was the guy who produced the first three Police albums above a converted cooperative building in Leatherhead in the mid-70s. And it's funny because he produced a couple of albums for Suzy and the Banshees, I think, and then the 3 Police albums, really big albums, but didn't really produce much after that. A few sort of one-hit wonders like the Lotus Eaters. But this is sort of thought of as maybe Suzy and the Banshees' sort of best album. We've got Spellbound on here, the singles, Arabian Nights as well. And I have been going through a bit of a Suzy phase, so I had to have this one in the collection, Juju by Suzy and the Banshees. Got another reissue here, an album that a bit of a favourite of mine from 1980. So it's Nuclear Days by the Vapors. So of course the Vapors toured with the Jam in 1980. They were managed by Bruce Foxton or Paul Weller's father, John. So it comes on sort of split vinyl, which I really do like. And although sort of the Vapors are really well known for Turning Japanese, which was almost the #1 in the UK and a pretty big hit in America, there's more to Turning Japanese on this album. I do love the artwork as well. But there was a few singles that just didn't reach the top 40, like News at 10 and Waiting for the Weekend. But there's also Cold War, Trains. There's a lot of very good Bunkers. A lot of very, very good tracks on it. I think it's a little bit underrated, and I was pretty pleased when it was reissued. My original copy has certainly seen better days, and their second album, Magnets, has also been reissued, and I'm toying with the idea of picking that up maybe in the new year. But yeah, please have this in the collection. Nuclear Days from 1980, The Vapors. I went to a bit of a VC meet-up. Me and John Downing, the 6-inch pianist, and Martin Parrott met up in Reading. Went round together. Vinyl Dale turned up, but unfortunately we missed him. But it was nice meeting up with John and Martin again. And I did my best to pick up any Manchester-related records while I was in Reading. About a 3.5 hour drive for me, so quite an undertaking, but I'm certainly glad that I went. It was pretty good fare as well. So I picked up this Manchester So Much to Answer For. So this is the Peel Sessions. So this cost me a tenner. I was pretty pleased with this. So a lot of really well-known Manchester artists like the Smiths and the Buzzcocks and the Fall, in Spirals, guy called Gerard, a few sort of lesser known, Dub Sex and the Railway Children. So there's the track listing. So a track by each of those artists. I think there's about 20 tracks on here. Also with the original inners as well. And it's on the Strange Fruit label. So to pick a double album up of Peel Sessions for a tenner, so that was a pretty good buy. So another band who's released a new album this year, Elbow. But again, Elbow's album's not made my top 10. I think it's got 3 or 4 really good tracks on it, but I think the rest of the tracks are not that great, so I think I ranked it about 7 out of 10. So I won't be buying Elbow's new album. But I picked this up a couple of months ago. So it's Elbow at the Ritz. So this was a Record Store Day issue, I think, last year. So the Ritz, if you don't know Manchester, it's one of the most famous venues in Manchester. It's on Polydor. And I actually saw R.E.M. at the Ritz in about 86. Great show. So this, it's only 30 minutes long. So, you know, no sooner as it started that it finishes. But it's got a nice selection of tracks on. Great Expectations, one of my favourite Elbow tracks. There's also Grounds for Divorce. But I know over in America and maybe parts of Europe, Elbow, you know, they're not as well known as they are in the UK. If you've never listened to Elbow, maybe check them out. So live at the Ritz, please have this one in the collection. But sadly, their new album will not be in my collection this year. There's quite a few sort of bands this year released albums. I've been quite disappointed with them. So I picked this album up. So it's Andy Bell. And this album's The View from Halfway Down. So Andy Bell, originally with Ride. I think he might have been in Hurricane #1 as well. And this is an album from last year that I didn't pick up last year. If I'd have picked it up last year, when I come to do my top 10 for last year, this would have been in the top 3. Of course, Andy Bell went on to work with Oasis for a number of years. I think I've streamed this, listened to it, and I was pretty shocked how great it is. If you don't have this album, you've never listened to it, I certainly recommend it. It's taken Andy Bell 30 odd years to get around to doing a solo album. I think he's done another album of sort of mixes of this album that's not easy to find, but I really recommend this album. It starts off with Love Comes in Waves, which is sort of a pretty traditional sounding, a little bit Ride-like, but it goes off into other directions and certainly worth checking out. So yeah, this solo album by Andy Bell. I do like picking up the odd greatest hits, and I picked up The Adventures of Thin Lizzy. So it's got a great jacket on it. And then on the back, a lot of the sort of solo albums. And I was watching a documentary on the BBC about Phil Lynott. And he was only 36 when he died, which, you know, so young. And he was sort of born out of wedlock and moved over to Ireland when he was 7, and there weren't many black people in Ireland, certainly in the what would have been sort of the 60s. And this documentary was pretty fascinating, and it really sort of pricked my interest really in Thin Lizzy. But I bought this album before I watched the documentary. Just great tracks on here, with Whiskey in the Jar, which was the first single, which wasn't their song, sort of an old Irish song, traditional song. And Thin Lizzy they did change quite a few members. Gary Moore was in Thin Lizzy and he left, and Snowy White, you know, quite a lot of members. But, you know, the boys are back in town, Dancing in the Moonlight, Waiting for an Alibi, Don't Believe a Word, just full of great songs. And the track Sarah, which is about his daughter. And in the documentary, obviously, speaking to his daughter, and he had another daughter called Catherine. So he had to write a song called Catherine as well. So pretty moving. Died in 1986, age 36. No age whatsoever. But Thin Lizzy, sort of one of the great sort of British rock bands, if you like. Picked up this 12-inch again when I was in Reading. I saw this, Come Home by James. So one of the early 12 inches by James. So when I saw that, I did pay up for it, paid a tenner, but it's in lovely condition. So again, went all the way down to Reading, over 200 miles, and just bought a load of Manchester records. So yeah, Come Home. Really like that jacket as well by James. So I've got most of Peter Tosh's albums, but I didn't have Legalise It. So Legalise It from 1976. So when he left the Wailers, it's on Virgin. So when he left the Wailers, he brought this album out. And of all the Peter Tosh albums, I'd say this is a one to get. His later albums are good, but I don't think they're as good as this. Obviously, Legalise It was banned in a lot of places, sort of in the West Indies. It's produced by Peter Tosh. Robbie Shakespeare, who's just passed away, there in the green, plays on this album. It's got a nice gatefold with it, with the lyrics. But I was watching something about Peter Tosh, and he was talking about how Bob Marley himself and Bunny Wailer were training to be sort of electrical welders, and that's sort of place where they sort of they were going to earn a living as welders. So, you know, imagining Peter Tosh as a welder with Bob Marley turning up at you, doing your welding for you, was quite an interesting sort of revelation. But yeah, Peter Tosh died far too young, sort of pretty horrendous circumstances as well. But if you see his albums, I do recommend them. So yeah, Legalise It by Peter Tosh. In my sort of local record shop, Wax and Beans, was on Black Friday, was selling records, some really good prices, and I bought this album 15 quid. So it's Goldfrapp, and this album Seventh Tree from 2008. So if you don't know Goldfrapp, Alison Goldfrapp's a singer, along with Will Gregory. I think he's in it, yeah. So there's Will. So in the 2000s, it's on yellow vinyl as well. Goldfrapp were pretty successful. This album reached number 2 in the UK charts. 4 singles. I think A&E was the main single off this album. I think Happiness was a single, maybe Some People. But yeah, I mean, it's a nice record to play on a Sunday morning. Pretty ambient. Got some nice sort of jazzy sounds on it. I really do like Goldfrapp, and this is probably one of my favourite albums by them. So yeah, Goldfrapp and Seventh Tree. Couple more to go. We've got a few more to go. So I picked up Gentlemen Take Polaroids from 1980. I picked this up from Mel at Cool for Cats Records. He was doing a record fair. So this is on Virgin. So in 1980, sort of Japan, they were a little bit, they were kind of under the umbrella of sort of new romantics, and that's sort of where I pigeonholed them. They had a lot of success with Quiet Life and Ghosts. But this has got a couple of singles on it, Night Porter and Gentlemen Take Polaroids. But they've been around for a while, sort of 77, 78. So they were sort of before New Romantics. So this is like their third, fourth album. And you can tell it's good. It's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Picked it up for under a tenner from Mel. And yeah, it's a strong 8 out of 10. Really pleased to have this in the collection. Gentlemen Take Polaroids by Japan from 1980. Picked up a jazz album. I picked up about over 20 jazz albums this year. A lot of them have been sort of blind buys. Have they all been successful? No, they haven't. But I picked this album up for a tenner. So it's Out to Lunch by Eric Dolphy. So I've seen a lot of people in the vinyl community showing this album, waxing lyrically about it. So I think it came out in '64. So I was listening to an interview with Eric Dolphy, and he was saying how working with sort of John Coltrane and Miles Davis, it was sort of an education for him, you know. And the guy was interviewing him was saying, you know, you're a great, and he says, you know, time will tell. And this album is not sort of easy listening jazz. It's kind of pretty challenging, really. Quite, I don't know whether avant-garde's the right word. You know, when it comes to jazz, I'm not going to say I'm like in my comfort zone. And I've only played it once, but I was surprised how surprising it was. It wasn't sort of easy listening, but I did enjoy it. So for a tenner, please pick up Eric Dolphy and Out to Lunch. 2 more to go. And I picked this up from a record shop in New Mills. It was just at the back of an electronic rack for £3. I just thought there wasn't anyone around so I could play stuff, so I just picked it out of the rack and put it on the turntable and listened to it, and I really enjoyed it. It's a Berlin Blondes, so I'd never heard of the Berlin Blondes, but I was quite interested by the jacket. So this is from 1980, and it's thought of as, I'm not going to say it's pioneering or groundbreaking, it's on EMI, but these guys were from Glasgow, and they were influenced by sort of krautrock, and when you listen to it, it's, I mean, I'm not going to say it's like Kraftwerk or anything like that, but it's quite raw around the edges. Sort of technology they were using was in its infancy, but I noticed that there's a CD sort of box set available. I mean, this is the only album they ever did, but I quite enjoyed it. Quite a nice little find. So yeah, for Berlin Blondes from Glasgow, one of the members I think went on to join Altered Images. But if you ever see this for a couple of quid, certainly worth investigating. And finally, we nearly got to 20 minutes. Idris Muhammad. So this is an album I picked up from Amazon. I must have seen someone showing it and talking about it, and it sort of pricked my interest, and I streamed it, from 1977. It's a reissue, of course. There's the label. So the big track on here is Could Heaven Ever Be Like This? And that track, Jamie XX used it on his album that I've got on vinyl, and I didn't actually know this version of it, which is the original. And it's, I mean, this Idris Muhammad is, I mean, I think, what was his name? He had a real normal name like Leo Morris or something like that, and he sort of turned to Islam when he was a teenager, I think. So Idris Muhammad was the name that he used, and he's sort of a drummer, percussionist. I mean, there's a lot of sort of who's who on this album, people sort of helping him. And to me, it's not jazz, it's like funk. It's a great funk, sort of heavy funk disco album, and it's top quality. Great album to have in my collection. So Idris Muhammad, and the album's called Turn This Mutter Out. So pleased to have that in my collection. Really good pickup. So 2021 is nearly over. There's a lot of people I've noticed dropping videos with their favourite sort of picks of the year. I will be doing that. Whether I'll be doing it this year, I'm not too sure. It's one or two albums that I want to get add to my collection. Of course, then I need to sort of listen to them and rank them, kind of thing. So I'm hoping to do maybe a couple more videos before the end of the year. If I don't do another video before Christmas, I hope everyone has a great Christmas. I'm sure you will. Thanks for watching my video. If you've got any comments, of course, I'd love to hear from you. I will always get back to you. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.